There are moments that show you exactly who you are to the world. For Mariah Kane, that moment came on a humid Tuesday afternoon at a gas station in rural Georgia, when two police officers decided that a decorated Marine Corps veteran and Hells Angels member was nothing more than trash that needed to be put in his place. But they had made a very serious miscalculation. Mariah Kane didn't stay where people tried to put her. The afternoon sun was baking the asphalt of Route 78. Mariah Kane rode her Harley-Davidson Road King into the Shell gas station with the ease of someone who had been riding motorcycles for 20 years. She was 38 years old, but her body bore the marks of far more grueling miles. 10 years in the Marines, including 2 tours in Afghanistan, had left a scar above her left eyebrow, a reconstructed knee that ached before rain, and a constant awareness that never fully faded. The Hells Angels jacket he wore over his black t-shirt was made of worn leather, with a red and white patch on his back, and the word Georgia written in bold letters underneath. It suited him perfectly. Mariah Kane wasn't just a member, she was a senior member, respected in the Southeast chapters, known for her steady leadership, and for absolutely not allowing anyone to be disrespected under her protection. Everyone knew her well, and knew that nothing would happen to them when she was around. That's why her brother Devin and her closest friend Tasha were with her today. The black SUV parked behind her Harley, and Mariah could see Devin in the passenger seat, his college textbooks visible on the dashboard. He was 22 years old, studying engineering at Georgia State, and smart enough to receive a full scholarship. When Devin was 12, his parents had died in a traffic accident on the I-85 highway, and Mariah had returned home from her second tour of duty to raise him. 20, he had recently left the Marine Corps and received a Purple Heart Medal and a letter of recommendation for transitioning to civilian life. 6 months later, he joined the Hells Angels and found something in the brotherhood and camaraderie that replaced the structure he had lost when he left the Marines. It was the only place he felt he belonged. Tasha Williams got out of the driver's seat, her Hells Angels jacket marking her as a full member. 35 years old, a nurse, and a friend who was always there for Mariah, from charity runs to the darkest nights after her parents' funerals. They had met in a veteran support group. "You okay?" Tasha called from across the parking lot. Mariah swung her leg off the Harley, her boots hitting the pavement with a hard thud. 300 miles. Need gas and water. Maybe some of those awful sausage sandwiches they grill over there, she replied. Those things would kill you faster than any mission, Tasha replied with a laugh, but she was already heading toward the station's convenience store. Devin stayed in the SUV, pulling out his phone, probably texting the study group that they'd missed class. When Mariah inserted her credit card, the gas pump clicked and began filling up. The afternoon was quiet, with only the distant hum of traffic and the chirping of crickets in the roadside trees audible. A pickup truck was parked at the far pump, 2 white men leaning on the hood, a Confederate flag decal clearly visible on the rear window. Mariah had seen this look before, the subtle shift in their posture when they noticed her skin color, her jacket, her presence in their space. The patrol car pulled into the station so quietly that Mariah almost didn't notice it at first. The patrol car pulled up behind the SUV, blocking it. Mariah knew in that instant that this was intentional. Mariah's situational awareness shifted into high gear. She continued filling the tank, but her peripheral vision tracked everything. 2 officers. The driver was tall, in his mid-40s. Mariah couldn't see him yet, but the name tag read Tanner. The passenger was younger, perhaps a young officer in his late 20s. The gas pump clicked and the tank was full. Mariah carefully replaced the nozzle, her movements deliberate and visible. She had learned it in the Marines and reinforced it with the Hells Angels. When dealing with authority figures looking for trouble, don't give them any ammunition. She always acted aware that they were looking for an excuse. "Good day, officers," she said in a calm voice. Officer Tanner stepped out of the patrol car, his face already twisted with disgust. "This pump is for paying customers," he shouted. "Not for scum like you," he added. The tone was heavy. Mariah felt a familiar tightness in her chest. "I am a paying customer. I filled my tank. I have my receipt in the card reader," she replied. Tanner casually placed his hand on his service weapon and closed the distance between them with determined steps. "We got a report of someone matching your description, robbing Williams Market about 5 miles ahead. Black woman, motorcycle, Hells Angels jacket. That's you," he said. It was an obvious lie. Mariah knew it. She had to remain calm regardless. Mariah had been driving on the highway for the past 6 hours, following Devin and Tasha's SUV from Atlanta. She hadn't stopped anywhere except at rest stops with witnesses and cameras. All the necessary evidence was there. "Sir, I've been on the road all day. I didn't go to Williams' shop. You can check," she replied. "Show me your ID." "Now," Tanner said. Mariah slowly reached for her wallet, keeping her hands visible. I'll get my ID. It's in my jacket pocket, she warned. She pulled out her driver's license, military ID card, and Hells Angels membership card. The trio of IDs was laid out for inspection. Tanner snatched them without looking, glanced at the IDs, and curled his lips. Hells Angels. So you're a member of that drug gang. Got it, he said. The prejudice had already taken hold. The Hells Angels are a motorcycle club, not a gang, said Mariah. We do charity work, she said. Save that for someone who cares, he said. Tanner tossed the IDs at her feet, forcing her to bend down to retrieve them. The young officer shifted uncomfortably. Tanner, maybe we should just check the license plate and verify it, he said. I decide what we do, Tanner said. He turned to Mariah. Get on your knees. Put your hands behind your head, he ordered. He was making a huge mistake, but Tanner wasn't even aware of it. On what grounds? Mariah stood up. I showed you my ID. I cooperated. I haven't committed any crime, she replied. Inside the SUV, Devin had noticed the confrontation. Mariah saw him out of the corner of her eye, pulling out his phone to start recording. Good kid. Documenting everything. She had taught him that. Tanner saw the phone too. His face flushed with anger. Put that phone away, he yelled, advancing toward the SUV. He's not breaking any laws, Mariah yelled back. Citizens have the right to record their interactions with the police, she said. Tanner turned to her. Shut up. This is your last warning. Get down on your knees, or I'll make you, he threatened. He shoved Mariah hard in the chest with both hands. Mariah was ready for this. Tanner was looking for any excuse to justify what would happen after the provocation. Devin, stay in the car, Mariah yelled, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her body. Don't interfere, just record. She knew how powerful that recording would be. Tanner opened the SUV's passenger door so forcefully that the hinges popped out. Devin raised his phone, the camera clearly visible, and began recording everything. I said shut it off. Tanner grabbed the phone and slammed it against the doorframe. Plastic and glass shards scattered across the sidewalk. No, Devin exclaimed. He was crazy. You can't. Tasha came out of the store with 2 bottles of water in her hand and froze when she saw the scene. What's going on? She said to herself. Deputy Cole suddenly approached her with a stun gun in his hand. Ma'am, step back. This is an official police matter, he warned her. They're my friend and his brother, Tasha said. What are the charges, she asked. Robbery, assault, resisting arrest. Tanner listed the charges as if reading from a menu. And you're interfering with the investigation, he said. Mariah's hands clenched into fists. This was a trap. She had been targeted because of her skin color and her jacket. Officer Tanner, she said, you're making a mistake. I didn't rob anyone. I didn't assault anyone. And I certainly didn't resist arrest because you have no legal grounds to arrest me, she tried to warn him again. But she knew she was wasting her time. She then stepped forward, not aggressively, but decisively. I am a decorated Marine Corps veteran. I served this country with honor. I deserve the respect you refuse to give me. And if you lay a hand on my brother or my friend, if you harm someone I care about, you will regret it, he warned Tanner. Tanner didn't like this situation very much. Tanner's face turned from red to almost purple. Did you just threaten a police officer? He asked harshly. I stated a fact, Mariah replied. Touch them and you die. Not necessarily by my hand, but by the consequences of your actions. The Hells Angels don't forget. The Marines don't abandon their own. And the law, not your version of it, but the real law, will hold you accountable. Cole's hand trembled on the stun gun. Tanner, maybe we should call for backup. Call a supervisor, he warned. I'm the supervisor here, he said. Tanner removed the handcuffs. Mariah Kane, you are under arrest for theft, assaulting a police officer, terrorist threats, and resisting arrest. You have the right to remain silent, he said, attempting to arrest her. I remained silent, Mariah interjected. I cooperated. I showed my ID. I explained I hadn't committed any crime. What I won't do is kneel inhumanely on this sidewalk while you fabricate charges to justify your prejudice. Tanner grabbed her arm. Mariah didn't resist. Hands behind your back, he yelled. Now there was physical contact. You're hurting her. Devon yelled from the SUV. Stop. Devon, it's okay, Mariah yelled. Stay calm. Don't do anything. Just remember everything, she said. Mariah was acting with full awareness of what she could do with the recordings in her hands. She was being smart. The handcuffs were fastened around her wrists, tight, deliberately painful. Mariah focused on breathing, on staying present, on not letting them see her pain and be satisfied. Gas station attendant Louis stood at the store entrance, recording with his phone. A few more witnesses had gathered. You're making a mistake, Mariah said. When this is over, when the truth comes out, you'll wish you'd made a different choice, she said. She predicted what would happen. She told him plainly he was making the mistake of his life. "The only mistake is thinking you belong to a respectable community," Tanner replied. He shoved her with unnecessary force into the back of the patrol car, narrowly avoiding her head hitting the doorframe. Mariah could see from the window that Tasha was running to Devin, pulling him out of the SUV and checking if he was hurt. The boy looked shaken but was okay. Angry tears were streaming down his face. Cole hesitated before getting into the patrol car. "Tanner, we don't have any real evidence," he warned Tanner. But Tanner wouldn't back down. "He threatened me." "You heard him. That's enough," he said. Tanner slammed the driver's door. As the patrol car pulled away from the gas station, Mariah saw her Harley one last time, still parked where she had left it. Tasha was now standing next to it, phone pressed to her ear, talking on the phone. After the patrol car moved off, the radio crackled. "Central, we're taking a female suspect to the county jail. The charges are robbery, assault, terrorist threats, and resisting arrest," Tanner announced. This was an outright lie. Everyone knew it. Mariah closed her eyes and did what she had done hundreds of times in war zones. She regulated her breathing, assessed the situation, and began planning her next move. They thought it was over. They didn't realize it had only just begun. Behind them on the gas station sidewalk, Tasha was on the phone with the one person who could mobilize the entire network within minutes. When the national president of the Hells Angels answered the phone, she said, "Bones, they arrested Mariah. On false charges, brutally. We need everyone." The reply came instantly. "We're on our way." In Atlanta, at a law firm specializing in civil rights cases, attorney Aisha Reynolds' phone began to ring. The county jail smelled like all the other detention centers Mariah had been held in before. 48 hours. They could hold her that long before the hearing. Tanner was using every minute of that time. He was using all the power he had. Have you ever encountered someone like this before? Mariah sat on a concrete bench serving as a bed, her Hells Angels jacket confiscated as gang paraphernalia, her personal belongings locked away. They had given her an orange jumpsuit 2 sizes too small and shoes 2 sizes too big. It didn't work. He had served twice in Afghanistan. He had survived combat, IED explosions, and the heat of Georgia summers that felt like air conditioning. He had held dying sailors in his arms and somehow found the strength to keep fighting. A prison cell in rural Georgia couldn't break him, but the anger, controlling the anger, was harder. It wasn't the hot, explosive kind of anger that hurt people. It was the cold, focused anger Mariah had learned to channel into action. Every second spent in this cell meant another second. Tanner thought he had won. Another moment he believed the badges overshadowed the truth. He would soon learn otherwise. 300 miles away in Atlanta, Tasha Williams sat in the parking lot of a Waffle House, phone on speaker, coordinating with people across 3 states. "Say that again," asked the voice on the other end. A deep, gravelly voice that reflected the authority of having run one of America's most famous motorcycle clubs for decades. Raymond Bones Morrison was 62 years old, a Vietnam veteran, and the national president of the Hells Angels. He had known Mariah since she joined the Georgia chapter 8 years ago. She had recently left the Marines and was looking for a new family. He had supported her promotion because he saw in her the same qualities that made great leaders: loyalty, courage, and an absolute intolerance for injustice. "They arrested her on false charges," Tasha repeated, her voice steady despite the exhaustion of 2 days of constant phone calls and coordination. "Theft, assault, terrorist threats, all fabricated. We have witnesses. We have the gas station security camera footage. Mariah did nothing but exist because she is black and wears our colors." "Where is Devin?" "With me." Shaken but okay. They broke his phone when he tried to record, but Luis, the gas station attendant, recorded everything on the security system. "He's ready to testify." There was a pause. Then Bones' voice came back, harder than steel. "Where are they holding him?" "Wilkinson County Jail. The sheriff's name is Doyle. From what I've learned in the last 2 days, he and Officer Tanner have a long history. They were teammates on the high school football team. Doyle has been sheriff for 12 years, running the department like his own kingdom. Of course he does." Bones' disdain was evident in his voice. "And they think they can make one of ours disappear in their system? Without media attention? Without any consequences? They're counting on it." Tasha watched Devin from the restaurant window, the young man drinking his 3rd cup of coffee in a few hours. "But I made some phone calls. I found us a lawyer." "Who?" "Aisha Reynolds, a human rights lawyer from Atlanta. She's been handling cases involving police brutality for 20 years. 3 years ago, she won a $15 million settlement against the Atlanta Police Department. And Tasha paused. "She's a biker. Not a Hells Angels member, but she rides a motorcycle. She lost her husband because of a police officer who claimed his life was in danger during a routine traffic stop. She understands. Can she get Mariah out? She's already working on it. The hearing is tomorrow morning. Aisha is filing a petition for her immediate release, denying the charges and preparing a federal civil rights case." Bones was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, His voice carried the weight of decisions that would mobilize hundreds of people. I'm calling a national meeting. All chapters within 500 miles. We're going to remind Wilkinson County who they're dealing with. Bones, we have to be smart about this, Tasha warned. If we look like an invading army, they'll use that against Mariah. They'll say she's part of a dangerous gang, that we're threatening public safety. Then we'll be the most well-behaved army they've ever seen. Peaceful, law-abiding, just a bunch of people standing there as witnesses. He paused for a moment. But Tasha, if they hurt her, if they do more to her than they've already done, it's all over. Tasha understood. The Hells Angels had a reputation, and for good reason. They protected their own members with absolute loyalty. But they also understood strategy. Right now, Mariah needed lawyers and public pressure more than muscle. I'll handle coordination with Aisha, Tasha said. Make sure everything we do supports the case, not undermines it. After hanging up, Tasha returned to Waffle House. Devon lifted her head from her phone, her eyes red from sleeplessness and suppressed tears. Any news? She asked quietly. Bones is mobilizing the national network. Aisha is preparing for tomorrow's hearing. I'm talking to my media contacts. Local news is interested, and if we make the right moves, we could get national coverage. Devon's hands clenched around the coffee cup. They broke my phone, all my evidence. Luis has the security camera footage, Tasha reminded him gently. Multiple angles, audio recording. Everything that happened was recorded. But Mariah is still in jail for something she didn't do. Because of a racist cop's decision. His voice trailed off. Tasha reached across the table and closed his hand with her own. Your sister is the strongest person I know. She survived Afghanistan. She raised you alone after your parents died. 2 small-town cops can't break her. But right now, she needs us to be strong. Can you do that? Devon nodded and straightened his shoulders. The movement painfully reminded Tasha of Mariah. The same resolve, the same refusal to accept defeat. What do you want me to do? Write down everything you remember. Every word Tanner said, every action, the times, if you can remember them. Aisha will need your statement. As Devon pulled out the borrowed laptop and began typing, Tasha made another phone call. This time, it was to gas station attendant Luis Martinez, who had seen everything and had the courage to preserve the evidence. Mr. Martinez? This is Tasha Williams. We spoke yesterday about the security camera footage. I saved them in 3 places, Luis said immediately. Cloud storage, an external drive, and I sent copies to my personal email. That cop, Tanner, came back here last night and tried to seize the recordings. He told me it was evidence in a criminal investigation. I told him he needed a search warrant. Did he get a search warrant? Not yet, but Sheriff Doyle called this morning. He made the same request. I won't give them anything without a court order. Even with a court order, I'll only give them copies. I'll keep the originals. Thank you, Tasha said sincerely. You're putting yourself in danger. My cousin was killed by the police in Phoenix 5 years ago. They said there was a problem during a traffic stop. He was 23 years old and unarmed. Luis's voice was calm but firm. If I can help it, I won't let that happen again. That woman, Mariah, didn't do anything wrong. I saw everything, and I'll testify to that in any court they want. After the phone call, Tasha allowed herself a moment of hope. She had evidence. She had witnesses. She had a lawyer who knew how to handle these kinds of cases. And she had the Hells Angels, an organization that, despite its tough reputation, understood loyalty and justice more deeply than most people realized. The next morning, Mariah was brought into the courtroom in handcuffs and leg irons. The orange jumpsuit hung loosely on her body, and her usually carefully styled natural hair was pulled back in a simple braid. But her spine was straight, her head held high, and her eyes were clear and focused as she surveyed the courtroom. The gallery was full. Tasha and Devon sat in the front row. Behind them, 30 Hells Angels members wearing their vests sat silently with their hands folded. The media filled the back rows, and despite the judge's restrictions on recording during the trial, cameras were ready, and at the defense table was a woman Mariah had never met but whose reputation she had heard of, Aisha Reynolds. 45 years old, black. She wore a flawless navy suit that reflected both professionalism and power. She stood up as Mariah approached, her face a mixture of compassion and barely suppressed anger. Ms. Kane, Aisha said as the police removed Mariah's handcuffs. I'm Aisha Reynolds. I'm going to get you out of here. I appreciate that, Mariah replied, her voice hoarse from drinking very little water for 2 days and the stress of being in custody. But what I really want is to ruin the careers of everyone who put me here. A small smile appeared on Aisha's lips. We can do both. Judge Patricia Warren entered. She was in her late 50s, with steel gray hair and a reputation for being tough but fair. She had been a judge for 15 years and was said to have zero tolerance for law enforcement officers who abused their authority. All rise, called the court clerk. The hearing began. Assistant District Attorney Michael Shaw, young, ambitious, and clearly uncomfortable with the presence of the Hells Angels in the packed courtroom, rose to argue for continued detention. Your Honor, the defendant is charged with serious crimes, robbery, assault on a police officer, terrorist threats, and resisting arrest. Given his known connection to a motorcycle gang and the seriousness of the charges, we believe he poses a flight risk and a danger to the community. Aisha stood up and the temperature in the courtroom seemed to drop 10 degrees. Your Honor, all the charges against my client are fabricated. Ms. Kane is a decorated Marine Corps veteran with a Purple Heart Medal and an honorable discharge. She has no criminal record. She has deep ties to this community through her family and motorcycle club. The club is not a gang. It is a legally recognized organization that does extensive charity work. He pulled out a file. Here are the security camera footage from the gas station where the alleged incident took place. The footage shows that Ms. Kane did nothing but fill her motorcycle with gas and attempt to show her ID when she encountered Officer Tanner. The footage clearly shows Officer Tanner initiating physical contact, destroying evidence when Miss Kane's brother tried to record the incident, and threatening Miss Kane's friend with a stun gun. ADA Shaw shifted uncomfortably. We weren't given these recordings because you didn't request them through the proper discovery channels. Aisha gently interrupted. But I'd be happy to provide copies to the court and the prosecutor's office. Right now, she handed a USB drive to the court clerk, who passed it to Judge Warren. Additionally, Aisha continued, there are sworn statements from numerous witnesses, including the gas station attendant, the truck driver, and other customers. They all state that Ms. Kane committed no crime and was targeted by Officer Tanner without cause. Judge Warren looked at ADA Shaw with an expression as if he had just realized he was wasting his time. Mr. Shaw, do you have any concrete evidence to support these allegations? Any witnesses other than the arresting officers? Any physical evidence? Anything? Shaw shuffled through his file with growing desperation. The officer's statements, contradicted by multiple witnesses and video evidence. Judge Warren cut him off, turning to Aisha. What are you requesting, counsel? The immediate dismissal of all charges and the release of my client. Furthermore, I am filing a federal civil rights lawsuit against Officer Tanner, Deputy Cole, Sheriff Doyle, and Wilkinson County for wrongful arrest, civil rights violations, destruction of evidence, and assault. The courtroom stirred with hushed conversation. Judge Warren banged his gavel once. Silence. Mr. Shaw, if you cannot present compelling evidence to support any of these allegations right now, and I mean right now, I am inclined to grant the defense attorney's request. Shaw looked at Sheriff Doyle, who sat with his arms crossed and his face flushed at the back of the courtroom. No help would come from that side. Your Honor, we need time to review the evidence. You had 48 hours, Judge Warren said coldly. The charges are dismissed. Ms. Kane, you are free to go. He looked at his assistants. Remove those handcuffs immediately. When the leg irons and handcuffs were removed, Mariah felt 2 days of tension fall from her shoulders. But the anger remained focused and sharp. Judge Warren wasn't finished yet. I also order the Wilkinson County Sheriff's Department to preserve all evidence related to this case, body camera footage, dashcam recordings, and all communication records related to Ms. Kane's arrest. The destruction or alteration of evidence will result in a charge of contempt of court and possible criminal prosecution. He looked directly at Sheriff Doyle. Understood, Sheriff? Doyle moved his jaw but nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Good. The hearing is adjourned. The gavel struck and the courtroom stirred. The Hells Angels members suddenly stood up and formed a protective corridor for Mariah to pass through. Devin pushed through the crowd, embraced his sister, and held her tightly. You're okay, he whispered. You're okay. I'm okay, Mariah confirmed, her voice trembling. After the immediate crisis had passed, the reality of the last 2 days hit her. Tasha appeared with Mariah's confiscated belongings, her jacket, wallet, keys. Harley's in the courthouse parking lot. We had it brought over from the gas station. Itar approached, briefcase in hand. Ms. Kane, we need to talk soon. But first, eat something, rest, and process what happened. Tomorrow we'll start preparing the case to ensure this never happens to anyone again. Outside the courthouse, after 2 days under artificial light, the afternoon sun was almost blinding. Mariah stood on the steps, blinking, her jacket back on. 30 Hells Angels members gathered around her, not threatening, just standing there as a visible reminder of solidarity. And into the parking lot poured what seemed like an endless stream of motorcycles. 50, 70, 100, riders from Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, Carolina, all responding to the call that one of their own had been targeted. Bones dismounted his custom-built Road Glide motorcycle and climbed the courthouse steps with the measured stride of someone who commanded respect. He stopped in front of Mariah and studied her with eyes that had seen much and forgotten nothing. Are you okay? He asked simply. I'm angry, Mariah replied. But I'm not broken. Good. Bones pulled her into a short, fierce hug. Because we're going to war. Legal war, public war, every kind of war except the kind that gets us arrested. And when we're done, Tanner and Doyle will wish they'd picked another target. Stepping back, he addressed the gathered drivers. We ride peacefully, we ride legally, but we ride together, and we make sure everyone knows why we're here. Mariah Kane is ours, and we protect ourselves. The engines roared in response, a noisy declaration echoing off the courthouse walls. As Mariah climbed onto her Harley, she felt the familiar weight close around her. Devon drawing near once more. "What now?" he asked. Mariah started her engine. After 2 days of silence and prison life, this noise brought her comfort. Now we'll work to make sure this never happens again. To me, to you, to anyone." She looked at the gathered riders, at Tasha and Devon, at the media cameras capturing every moment, at Sheriff Doyle watching from the courthouse window with a look of fear. "Now," Mariah said quietly, "we'll show them what happens when you mess with the Hells Angels." The return trip to Atlanta was like a parade, over 100 motorcycles moving in formation, displaying their unity and strength. Mariah carried Isa Reynolds' business card and a promise in her pocket. Justice would come, not the kind that wears a badge and abuses its authority, the kind that wears leather vests and refuses to back down. The video went viral within 12 hours. Luis Martinez had uploaded the gas station security camera footage to YouTube with a simple title, "Medal-winning Navy veteran wrongfully arrested." Full footage. By morning, it had been viewed 2.3 million times. By evening, it was trending on all major social media platforms and being discussed on every cable news channel from CNN to Fox. The footage was strikingly clear. 4 different camera angles captured every moment. Mariah was peacefully filling her Harley with gas. Tanner suddenly approached aggressively. The ID check was almost done with a glance. A shove. Devon's phone was shattered. Tasha was threatened with a stun gun. Even as she was brutally attacked, Mariah calmly defended her rights. And most importantly, the audio recording. Crystal clear. "This pump isn't for scum like you. It's for paying customers. Hells Angels. So you're a member of that drug gang too. Get on your knees or I'll make you." Every word was recorded. Every lie was exposed. Every abuse of authority was captured in high-resolution digital evidence. The public reaction was immediate and massive. Justice for Mariah trended worldwide. Veterans groups rallied. Civil rights organizations issued statements. And the Hells Angels, who normally operated under the radar, stepped into the spotlight with strategic precision. Isa Reynolds knew how to leverage this momentum. 3 days after Mariah's release, she held a press conference on the steps of the federal courthouse in Atlanta. Behind her, Mariah, Tasha, and Devon stood wearing Hells Angels vests. And lined up in perfect order with their motorcycles were 50 Hells Angels members from various parts of the Southeast. Media turnout was massive. Local news, national networks, motorcycle magazines, civil rights journalists, all had their cameras and microphones ready. Mariah stepped onto the podium with the controlled anger of someone who had fought this battle many times before. "My name is Isa Reynolds, and I represent Mariah Kane, a decorated Marine Corps veteran who was wrongfully arrested, tortured, and held in custody for 48 hours by Wilkinson County law enforcement. Today, we are filing a federal civil rights lawsuit against Officer Tanner, Deputy Cole, Sheriff Doyle, and Wilkinson County." She held up a thick document. "This lawsuit alleges violations of the 4th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, wrongful arrest, assault, destruction of evidence, and years of racist policing targeting minorities in Wilkinson County." A reporter asked, "What is the evidence for these practices?" "Thank you for asking." Isa opened a presentation on her tablet and connected it to a portable screen. "Over the past 8 years, we have identified 17 official complaints against Officer Tanner. 15 involved Black or Latino civilians. 14 involved allegations of excessive force or racial profiling. Each was dismissed by Sheriff Doyle without adequate investigation. Records, the complaints piled up on the screen, monotony upon monotony, all covered up by a system designed to protect itself. Furthermore," Isa continued, "we have the statement of Officer Cole, who agreed to cooperate with our investigation in exchange for immunity. Officer Cole will state that Officer Tanner systematically targeted minority bikers, particularly Hells Angels members, based on the belief that they were all guilty, despite no evidence of criminal activity." The cameras turned to Mariah. She stepped forward with a calm voice despite the weight of the moment. "I served this country for 10 years. I earned a Purple Heart in Afghanistan. I came home and raised my little brother after our parents died. I joined the Hells Angels because they gave me a family and a purpose, to do charity work, support veterans, contribute to the community." He pointed to the riders behind him. "These people are not a gang. They are mechanics, nurses, teachers, and small business owners who love motorcycles and brotherhood. And we became Officer Tanner's target not because we broke any laws, but because he decided we were guilty because of the color of our skin and our patches." A reporter asked, "What do you want to happen?" "I want Officer Tanner fired and prosecuted. I want Sheriff Doyle removed from office. I want systemic reform so that what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else who looks like me or rides a motorcycle like I do." Mariah's voice grew stronger. "And I want everyone watching to understand that badges don't grant immunity. Abuse of power will be exposed. We will resist." The press conference lasted 45 minutes, and the questions ranging from legal strategy to the Hells Angels' role in supporting Mariah. Throughout, 50 bikers sat in complete silence on their motorcycles, a show of unity and strength impossible for the media to ignore. As the cameras packed up, a person approached hesitantly from the edge of the crowd. Deputy Sheriff Cole, dressed in civilian clothes, looked like a man who had made the hardest decision of his life. Aisha noticed him first and stepped off the podium to speak with him privately. Mariah watched Cole's body language, guilty, ashamed, but determined. A few minutes later, Aisha called Mariah over. "Miss Kane, Deputy Cole has some things he wants to tell you directly." Cole couldn't meet her eyes. I should have stopped it. When Tanner attacked you, when he broke your brother's phone, when he threatened your friend, I should have intervened. I should have reported it. Why didn't you?" Mariah asked, her voice neutral. "Because I was afraid. I was afraid of Tanner. I was afraid of Doyle. I was afraid of being labeled a snitch and ruining my career." Cole finally lifted his head. "But after watching that video and seeing what I was part of, I couldn't live with myself anymore. So I'm going to testify. I'm going to tell everything I know about Tanner's patterns of behavior, Doyle's protection of abusive officers, the whole corrupt system." Mariah studied him for a long time. This man had stood by while Mariah was brutally beaten. He had pointed the stun gun at Tasha. His silence had made Tanner's abuse possible. But now he was breaking that silence. He was taking a stance that would cost him everything. "I appreciate your honesty," Mariah finally said. "But understand this. It doesn't make us equal. You're doing the right thing now, but it doesn't erase your participation in what happened. The court will determine your fate based on your cooperation. But my forgiveness? You'll have to earn that over time." Cole nodded in acceptance of the decision. "I understand, and however long it takes to make this right, that's how long I'll spend." The Hells Angels' response to Mariah's arrest was strategic, calculated, and overwhelming. Over the next 2 weeks, the organization launched a campaign they called the Justice March. Every weekend, hundreds of Hells Angels members from across the country descended on small towns in Georgia, peacefully passing through communities while distributing information about police accountability and civil rights. They collaborated with the NAACP, ACLU, and veterans organizations. They organized fundraising events to collect money for families victimized by police harassment. They held town hall meetings where people could share their stories of being targeted by law enforcement. And they wore cameras everywhere they went. Body cameras, helmet cameras, phone cameras. They documented every interaction with the police, creating an archive of evidence that made it impossible for malicious individuals to operate in the shadows. Bones coordinated this effort from Atlanta, transforming the Hells Angels national network into a civil rights enforcement mechanism. Appearing on news programs, he explained, clearly and measuredly, that the organization had always stood against injustice but rarely found a platform to make it known to the public. "We don't want special treatment," he told one interviewer. "We demand equal treatment. And when you organize, when you document, when you refuse to be silenced, you show that change is possible." Tasha and Devin became integral parts of the movement. Devin spoke about the importance of recording interactions with police at universities, and his story about his phone being broken captured the attention of young people nationwide. Tasha organized medical support for trips to ensure participants could access nurses and first aid if police tried to create medical emergencies. Organized medical support for the trips. And Mariah, she became the face of the campaign, almost by accident. Her military service, her membership in the Hells Angels, her openly expressed anger, all of this combined to create a narrative that challenged easy stereotypes about who deserves justice and who deserves suspicion. But the legal battle was just beginning. Aisha's case wasn't just against individuals, it targeted the entire system that enabled Tanner's abuse. Discovery requests were sent for years of personnel files, complaint logs, internal communications, and financial documents showing how the department's resources were spent protecting bad officers rather than serving the community. Sheriff Doyle responded harshly. He claimed the case was a witch hunt, motivated by anti-police bias. He argued that Tanner had acted appropriately given the threatening behavior of a motorcycle gang member. He tried to portray Mariah as someone chasing money, not justice. This strategy backfired spectacularly. When Aisha released Cole's sworn testimony, the document was devastating. Cole detailed how Tanner had targeted minorities, particularly bikers, for years. He described a department culture where officers competed to see who could make the most gang-related, and that those who met their quotas received promotions and preferred shifts. He gave specific examples: a Latino motorcycle club harassed during a charity toy drive, a black veteran riding a Harley who was stopped 7 times in 2 months but released without charges each time, a woman wearing Hells Angels colors who was subjected to a roadside strip search based on a tip that was later proven false. And most gravely, he added emails and text messages showing Sheriff Doyle actively encouraged this behavior, praising officers who kept undesirables out of nice neighborhoods and dismissing complaints as troublemakers trying to make money. The documents were made public on Friday. On Monday, the Georgia Attorney General announced a criminal investigation into the Wilkinson County Sheriff's Department. On Wednesday, the FBI launched a civil rights investigation. On Friday, 3 more sheriff's deputies offered to cooperate. The system that had protected Tanner and Doyle for years was collapsing under the weight of its own corruption. 4 weeks after her arrest, she sat in Mariah Oisha's office, reviewing the deposition transcripts. The case had expanded to include a class-action lawsuit, representing 12 people who had been wrongfully arrested or harassed by Tanner and his colleagues. "We caught them," she said. But also a class-action lawsuit representing 12 people who had been wrongfully arrested or harassed by Tanner and his colleagues. "We've got them," said Oisha, pointing to the pile of documents. "The evidence is very strong. Repeated practices, systematic abuse, deliberate indifference to civil rights violations. The jury will be furious when they see this." "What about criminal charges?" asked Mariah. "Legal penalties are fine, but I want Tanner and Doyle in jail. The prosecutor will present to the grand jury next week. With Cole's testimony, the video evidence, and the pattern of conduct we've established, indictment is almost certain." Mariah nodded, but the hard look on her face didn't change. "Almost certain isn't good enough. These men treated me ruthlessly, traumatized my brother, threatened my best friend, and they did it all while wearing their badges. They need to face the justice system they abused. They will," Aisha promised. "But we need to be patient. Building a criminal case takes time." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Tasha entered, followed by Bones and a man Mariah didn't recognize. He was old, white, and wore a suit symbolizing federal authority. "Mariah Kane?" the man said, extending his hand. "I'm Special Agent Marcus Chen, FBI Civil Rights Division. I'd like to speak with you about your case, and a few other cases we're investigating in Wilkinson County." Over the next 2 hours, Agent Chen explained the scope of the FBI's investigation. It went far beyond Tanner and Doyle. They had uncovered a network of sheriffs in small towns across Georgia, operating with minimal oversight, targeting minorities and bikers, and covering for each other. Mariah's case had been the catalyst that exposed this network. Video evidence, public pressure, and the organized response from the Hells Angels had created an environment where other victims could safely come forward, and witnesses like Cole could find the courage to tell the truth. "We're looking at federal RICO charges," Agent Chen explained. "Conspiracy to deprive citizens of their civil rights. Abuse under the guise of law. Obstruction of justice. This goes beyond individual bad actors. It's systematic corruption." "How many people were harmed?" Mariah asked quietly. "Based on what we've uncovered so far, hundreds. Over the past decade, across 3 counties. Unjustified arrests, fabricated evidence, excessive force, sexual assault during fake searches." Chen's jaw tightened. "Your case has exposed something that has been operating in the shadows for years." After Chen left, Mariah sat silently, trying to process the magnitude of what her arrest had uncovered. She had thought it was about a racist cop and a corrupt sheriff. Instead, it was about a system designed to target people who didn't fit the acceptable definition. Bones spoke first. "This is a bigger issue than we thought. It always has been." "Acceptable." Bones spoke first. "This is a bigger issue than we thought. It always was," Mariah replied. "We just finally have the evidence to prove it." Tasha squeezed her friend's shoulder. "Are you okay?" "No, but I will be. Once Tanner and Doyle are in jail, and the system protecting them is gone." Mariah stood up, her military training evident in her upright posture. "How long until the trial?" "Tanner's criminal case will be first," said Aisha. "Probably 3 to 4 months, then the civil case will follow." "But Mariah, you need to prepare yourself. It's going to be tough. They'll attack your character, your military service, your Hells Angels membership. They'll try to make you the bad guy." Mariah's smile was sharp and cold. "Let them try. I have video evidence, federal agents, and hundreds of brothers who will testify about my character. Plus, I have a decorated military record and a community standing behind me." She looked at everyone in the room. Oisha, Tasha, Bones, Devin, sitting quietly in the corner. They picked the wrong target, and now they're going to learn what it costs to mess with someone who refuses to stay silent. Outside Oisha's office, the Georgia sun was setting, painting the Atlanta skyline in shades of orange and gold. Mariah walked to the window and looked out at the city where she had built her life after leaving the Marines, where she had found her family in the Hells Angels, where she had raised Devin. They tried to take all of this away from her with nothing but prejudice and power. They failed. And now Mariah Kane would make sure that every second of injustice they inflicted on her and on everyone else who had silently suffered until someone finally emerged with the resources and platform to fight back would be paid for. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. And this time, the Hells Angels were not alone. The Richard B. Russell Federal Building stood majestically against the Atlanta skyline. Its modern architecture was designed to reflect both authority and transparency. 3 months after Mariah's arrest, on a humid Monday morning in late August, the building was filled with people who had come to see justice served. Officer Trent Tanner's criminal case had finally begun. Federal prosecutors moved aggressively, charging Tanner with rights violations, wrongful arrest, assault, destruction of evidence, and conspiracy, using the law as a pretext. Sheriff Doyle faced similar charges, additionally accused of obstructing justice by covering up complaints and protecting abusive officers. The courtroom was packed to standing room only. Mariah sat behind the prosecution table with Tasha and Devin, surrounded by 30 Hells Angels members who had taken time off work to attend every day of the trial. The media filled the back rows, cameras and notebooks poised to capture every moment. At the defense table sat Tanner and his lawyer, Gerald Hutchins. Hutchins was an expensive, experienced lawyer known for getting cops acquitted. Tanner wore a suit instead of his uniform and looked almost respectable to anyone who didn't know what he was up to. Beside him, Sheriff Doyle sat with his arms crossed, a stubborn, defiant look on his face. Judge Patricia Warren presided, the judge who had dismissed the charges against Mariah 3 months earlier. During pretrial motions, she had made it clear that she would show zero tolerance for law enforcement officers who abused their authority, and that this trial would be conducted in strict accordance with the law. The lead prosecutor was Jennifer Hayes, a 42-year-old African-American woman who had built her career prosecuting civil rights violations. Standing with the quiet confidence of someone with overwhelmingly strong evidence, she delivered her opening statement. "Members of the jury," Hayes began, approaching the jury box. "Next week you will hear a case about a decorated Marine Corps veteran who stopped to get gas and spent 48 hours in jail. Not because he committed a crime, not because he posed a threat. The purpose was Officer Trent Tanner's decision that a black woman wearing a Hells Angels jacket did not belong in his district. He brought up the first image on the courtroom monitors, a map showing the 17 complaints filed against Tanner. This was not an isolated incident, it was a pattern. For 8 years, Officer Tanner systematically targeted minorities, particularly bikers, based solely on his prejudices and his belief that his badge granted him immunity from consequences. The next slide showed Mariah's military record. Purple Heart, honorable discharge, commendations for bravery. Mariah Kane served this country with distinction. She risked her life in Afghanistan. She returned home and raised her younger sibling after her parents died. She joined a motorcycle club dedicated to extensive charity work and veteran support. And on May 15th, while returning home from a Veterans Memorial event, she stopped at a rural gas station to refuel. Hayes clicked on the security camera footage. What happened next was recorded by multiple cameras and witnessed by many people. You will see everything. And when you see it, you will understand that this is not about a police officer making a difficult decision in a difficult situation. This is an incident where a man with a badge thought he could abuse his authority with impunity. He returned to his seat. The jurors already looked uneasy, and the evidence hadn't even been presented yet. Hutchins stood up for the defense and tried to create reasonable doubt. "Jurors, you will hear many inflammatory words about systematic abuse and racist targeting. However, what the evidence will actually show is that Officer Tanner acted on a legitimate report of suspicious activity, attempted to investigate, and encountered resistance from an individual who threatened him. It was a weak opening statement, and everyone knew it. While the video evidence showed unprovoked aggression, it was difficult to claim it was a legitimate investigation. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. First witness, Luis Martinez, gas station attendant. Mr. Martinez, you were working on the afternoon of May 15. What did you see?" Luis spoke clearly. His accent was slight, but his expression was firm. "I saw a woman on a motorcycle stop to get gas. She was calm and professional. She was a paying customer. Then 2 police cars arrived. Officer Tanner immediately approached her aggressively. Did you hear what he said? He called her trash. He said the pump was for paying customers, not people like her. Then he accused her of theft, but I could see she wasn't anywhere near Williams' store. That's 5 miles up the road, and she was at my station the whole time." Hayes showed the security camera footage. "Is this what you recorded?" "Yes. 4 camera angles. Policy requires me to keep the footage for 30 days, but when I saw what happened, I made multiple backups." The footage played on monitors in the courtroom. The image and sound quality were excellent. Every moment of Mariah's ordeal was documented. The jury watched Tanner's approach, his aggressive body language, his dismissive attitude toward her identity. They saw him push Mariah. They saw Devin's phone get smashed. They saw Tasha threatened with a stun gun. Several jurors were visibly angry. "Mr. Martinez, did you see Ms. Kane commit any crime?" "No. She paid for the gas. She showed her ID when asked. She remained calm even when attacked. The only crimes I witnessed were committed by Officer Tanner. Hutchins tried to shake him down during cross-examination, suggesting the cameras might have missed something, that Luis might be biased against the police. But Luis was resolute. "I have family members who work in law enforcement," he said quietly. "Good cops who do their jobs honorably. Officer Tanner is not one of them. He disgraces his badge." Second witness, Devin Kane. He took the stand wearing a suit that made him look older than his 22 years, but his nervousness was evident. Hayes approached him gently. "Devin, Mariah is your sister. Can you tell the jury about your relationship? She raised me after our parents died when I was 12. She had just returned from Afghanistan, dealing with her own trauma, but she took custody of me and provided everything I needed. She sent me to school. She supported my dreams." Devin's voice was calm. "She's the strongest person I know." What happened on May 15th? Devin recounted that day. He and Tasha were following Mariah in an SUV as she was returning home from a veterans event. They stopped at a gas station. Officer Tanner immediately became aggressive. "Because I've seen so many news stories showing what happens when there's no evidence, I took out my phone to record it. My sister taught me to document everything. Stay calm. Let the truth speak for itself. What happened to your phone?" Officer Tanner saw me recording him. He opened the car door and slammed my phone against the door frame. He completely destroyed it. Then he threatened to arrest me for interference. Hayes showed the jury the shattered phone, or what was left of it, the shattered screen, the bent frame, completely non-functional. That phone contained evidence of what happened, evidence that Officer Tanner deliberately destroyed. "Did your sister do anything to provoke this treatment?" "No. She was polite. She cooperated. She showed her military ID, her driver's license, anything they asked for. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten. She just wanted to be treated with basic human dignity." Devin's voice trembled slightly, and for that she spent 48 hours in jail. Hutchins tried to imply that Devin might be biased, that his statement stemmed more from loyalty than from facts. However, the destroyed phone and video evidence made it impossible to claim that Devin had fabricated anything. Third witness, Tasha Williams. She described her friendship with Mariah, their military service together, the charity events they did with the Hells Angels, and their work supporting veterans. Then she described in detail what she saw at the gas station. "When I came out of the store, I saw Deputy Cole pointing a stun gun at me. Not because I was doing anything threatening, I had 2 bottles of water in my hand, but because I asked my friend what was going on." "How did that make you feel?" "Scared. I'm a nurse. I know what stun guns can do to the human body. I've seen people injured, traumatized, and I was being threatened with a stun gun for asking a question." Fourth witness, Officer James Cole. When he took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. Cole had been granted immunity in exchange for his testimony, but his career in law enforcement was over. He had resigned from the Wilkinson County Sheriff's Department, and after burning his old life to the ground, had started working in construction to try to build a new one. Officer Cole, Hayes began. "How long did you work with Officer Tanner?" 4 years. Shortly after finishing training, I was assigned to patrol with him. "What was that experience like?" Cole took a breath. "Tanner taught me there are 2 kinds of people, real Americans and everyone else. Everyone else included minorities, bikers, anyone who didn't fit his acceptable definition. He told me our job was to keep the undesirables out of the good neighborhoods." "Did he specifically target certain groups?" "Yes, especially Black and Latino bikers. Regardless of their actual connections or criminal activities, he called them all gang members. He said they were all drug dealers and troublemakers who needed to be kicked out of the county." Hayes examined internal communications, emails, and text messages between Tanner and other officers, including Sheriff Doyle. The messages were heavy. "Look at this correspondence," Hayes said, showing a text message. Tanner wrote, "I stopped another motorcycle gang member today. I really scared him. I'm sure he'll think twice before passing through here again." Sheriff Doyle replied, "Good job. Keep our streets clean." Cole confirmed the authenticity of the messages. Sheriff Doyle encouraged this behavior. He praised officers who made gang-related stops and arrests. This wasn't about public safety. It was about intimidation. "What about the day Ms. Kane was arrested?" "I was with Tanner when we saw her at the gas station. Before approaching her, Tanner said, 'Hell's Angels, it's time to teach someone else a lesson.' I asked if we had a reasonable cause to stop them. He said no, that bikers are automatically suspects." Cole's voice dropped. "I should have stopped him. When he pushed Mrs. Kane, when he broke her brother's phone, when he threatened her friend with a stun gun, I should have intervened. Instead, I stood there and let it happen because I was afraid of retaliation. What changed? I watched the video. I saw my own cowardice documented in high definition, and I realized that staying silent made me just as guilty as Tanner. That's why I came forward." Hutchins attempted to question Cole's credibility during cross-examination and implied that he was lying to avoid prosecution. But Cole did not waver. "I am guilty of complicity. I am guilty of remaining silent while wrongdoing occurred. But now I am telling the truth, and I will live with the consequences of both my silence and my testimony." Fifth witness, Mariah Kane. She walked to the witness stand wearing a Hells Angels jacket, her military bearing evident with every step. The courtroom was completely silent as she took the oath. Hayes approached respectfully. "Miss Kane, tell the jury about your military service." Mariah detailed her 10 years in the Marine Corps, 2 tours in Afghanistan, combat engineer specializing in IED detection and disposal. Her Purple Heart medal came from an explosion that killed 2 teammates and resulted in the reconstruction of her knee and hearing loss in her left ear. "Why did you join the Hells Angels after leaving the military?" "I needed a new family, a new purpose. The Hells Angels gave me both. We organized charity rides for children's hospitals, veteran support, and disaster relief. We're not a gang, we're a brotherhood of people who love motorcycles and believe in looking out for each other." Tell the jury what happened on May 15th. Mariah's voice was steady as she described that day. The Veterans Memorial Ceremony she attended, the drive home with Devin and Tasha following in their SUV, stopping at a rural gas station to fill up. Officer Tanner approached me aggressively right away. He called me trash. He accused me of theft without any evidence. When I tried to show him my ID, he barely looked at it and refused. "What did he say about your military service?" "He probably said I had PTSD and was imagining threats that weren't there. He mocked my military service. He said my veteran status didn't make me special." The jury was angry. The veterans sat in the gallery, their faces hardened with rage. When did the situation escalate? When my brother started recording. Tanner broke his phone, then shoved me hard enough that I had to fight to keep my balance. I kept my cool because I'm trained to handle high-stress situations, but inside I was terrified. Because I've seen what happens to people who resist, even when their resistance is completely justified. "Did you threaten Officer Tanner?" Mariah looked into the jury's eyes. "I told him he would regret it if he hurt my brother or my friend. Not because I would hurt him, but because the Hells Angels protect their own members, and there are consequences for abusing authority. I told him his actions would be documented and questioned. I did not threaten him with violence." Hayes played the security camera footage again and showed the jury exactly what Mariah had said and how she had behaved. The warning was clear, but not threatening. The mistreatment was undeniable. What was it like to be arrested and put in jail? Humiliating. It was dehumanizing. I was strip-searched, put in a size too small orange jumpsuit, and held in a cell for 48 hours without adequate food or water. I was not allowed to make a phone call. Despite having no criminal record and having served 10 years in the military, I was treated like a dangerous criminal. What do you expect from this case? Mariah's voice was quiet but intense. "I want Officer Tanner held accountable. I want Sheriff Doyle removed from office. And I want systemic reform so that what happened to me doesn't happen to the next veteran, the next biker, the next person whose skin color or lifestyle doesn't fit someone's prejudiced expectations." Hutchins' cross-examination was aggressive, attempting to portray Mariah as someone seeking money and attention. However, each attack was deflected by her calm, fact-based responses. When he implied that her Hells Angels membership was linked to a criminal organization, Mariah calmly detailed the group's extensive charitable work and contributions to the community. When he implied that the trauma of her arrest had foreeye, she looked him in the eye and said, "I was shot at in Afghanistan. I survived IED explosions. I held dying sailors in my arms. Nothing about my arrest was exaggerated. This was 48 hours in which I experienced exactly what millions of minorities experience when confronted by law enforcement who view them as guilty until proven innocent." Closing arguments were made on Friday afternoon. Hayes stood before the jury one last time. "You've seen the evidence. Video showing unprovoked aggression, testimony from witnesses with no reason to lie, documents proving a pattern of abuse. And you heard from Miss Kane herself, a decorated veteran who served this country with honor and was treated like a criminal because he was black and wore motorcycle club colors." He pointed to Tanner, who sat stone-faced at the defense table. Officer Tanner thought his badge made him untouchable. He thought he could abuse his authority with impunity. He thought minorities and bikers were acceptable targets for his prejudices. He was wrong, and it's your job to tell him that. Hutchins closed by arguing that Tanner was just doing his job in a difficult situation. But the defense was futile in the face of the weight of video evidence and witness testimony. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the jury foreman, a black woman in her 60s who had served in the Army during Operation Desert Storm, stood and read the verdict. Charge of violation of rights under the guise of law, guilty. Charge of unlawful arrest, guilty. Charge of assault, guilty. Charge of destruction of evidence, guilty. Charge of conspiracy, guilty. He was found guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted. The Hells Angels members stood up together, not to cheer, but to bear witness. Devon hugged his sister. Tasha covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Mariah sat motionless, feeling the end of 3 months of tension. Judge Warren banged his gavel to restore order. "Mr. Tanner, You have been found guilty of serious crimes committed under the guise of the law. You violated your oath, abused your authority, and targeted an innocent woman based on unfounded prejudices. The sentence will be handed down in 2 weeks, but I want you to understand this. You will receive a prison sentence. A long prison sentence. As Tanner was led away in handcuffs, his face drained of color from the shock, Mariah allowed herself a small smile, not entirely satisfied. But it was an acknowledgement that justice, slow, hard, painful justice, had been served. Sheriff Doyle's case was next, but for now, this victory was enough. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon sun felt somehow hotter. Mariah stood on the steps surrounded by Devin, Tasha, Bones, Aisha, and the 50 Hells Angels members who had testified during the trial. Aisha spoke first. The sentence will be announced in 2 weeks. I hope Judge Warren gives him the maximum penalty. Next comes the civil case. We'll be seeking millions of dollars in damages from the county. Bones stepped forward, a rare emotion visible on his weathered face. You did it, brother. Not just for yourself, but for everyone he hurt. For everyone who comes after. Mariah looked at Devin, who had matured so much in the last 3 months. She looked at Tasha, who had supported her without hesitation. She looked at the bikers who had left everything behind to come here. We did it, she corrected. All of us, together. The engines roared to life, a loud declaration echoing off the walls of the federal courthouse. Justice had been served, and tomorrow they would continue their work to ensure this was not a one-time victory, but the beginning of real change. 2 weeks after the guilty verdict, the same federal courtroom filled again for the sentencing, but this time the atmosphere was different. There was no tension born of uncertainty, but instead an atmosphere filled with the expectation that justice would finally be measurable. Mariah sat in the front row with Devin and Tasha, surrounded by members of the Hells Angels who had attended every day of the trial. Behind them were people who had emerged since his arrest, other victims of Tanner's abuse, targeted families, community members who had feared the Wilkinson County Sheriff's Department for years. They were all here to see the outcome. Judge Patricia Warren entered the courtroom with a serious expression. For 2 weeks she had reviewed the pre-sentencing reports, the impact statements from the victims, and the arguments presented by both the prosecution and the defense regarding the appropriate punishment. Tanner stood at the defense table in prison. Orange. The suit and tie of the trial had been replaced by the reality of his new status, a convicted criminal, a former police officer, soon to be a federal prisoner. His lawyer had requested leniency, arguing that Tanner had a family, no prior record, and had only made mistakes under the stress of difficult working conditions. These pleas were nothing but a waste of paper. Mr. Tanner, Judge Warren began, his voice heavy with authority and barely suppressed disgust. I have reviewed your case thoroughly. I have read the statements of 17 different people who filed complaints against you over 8 years. These complaints were dismissed without adequate investigation. I watched video evidence showing you assaulting a decorated veteran. I heard testimony showing you targeted minorities solely because of your prejudices. He paused for a moment and looked directly at him. You were given a badge, a gun, and the trust of the people. You systematically, repeatedly, and without remorse violated that trust. Even now, you don't seem to understand the damage you've caused. Tanner moved his jaw, but said nothing. For the crime of violating rights under the guise of the law, I sentence you to 8 years in federal prison. For the crime of unlawful arrest, I sentence you to 2 years in prison. For the crime of assault, 3 consecutive years. For the crime of destroying evidence, 2 consecutive years. For the crime of conspiracy, 3 consecutive years. Total sentence, 18 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole. The courtroom stirred with stunned silence. 18 years. Tanner would be nearly 60 when he was released. Furthermore, Judge Warren continued, you are permanently barred from any law enforcement position, from carrying a weapon, and from any position requiring public trust. You will forfeit your pension and all benefits accrued during your years of service. Additionally, you will be required to complete anger management and anti-bias training, though I have little hope that this will change your fundamental character. He looked at the spectator gallery behind Tanner. Ms. Kane and the other victims, I'm sorry for what happened to you. I'm sorry it took the system so long to hold this man accountable. But I hope this punishment sends a message that badges do not grant immunity and that abuse of power will be severely punished. As the marshals led Tanner away, Mariah watched without satisfaction or joy. She simply accepted silently that a piece of justice had been served. But Tanner was only part of the problem. Sheriff Doyle's punishment came later. His case was resolved more quickly. The evidence against him was even heavier, documenting a department culture he had fostered for years of covering up complaints, protecting abusive officers, and encouraging racial profiling. When Doyle stood for sentencing, Judge Warren's words grew harsher. Sheriff Doyle, You weren't just a participant in this abuse, you were its architect. You created a system where officers like Tanner could go unpunished. You dismissed legitimate complaints. You destroyed evidence. You retaliated against witnesses. And you did all this while being paid with taxpayers' money and pretending to serve the community. His voice was as sharp as a knife. I sentence you to 15 years for conspiracy, 5 years for obstruction of justice, and 3 years for civil rights violations. Total 23 years. You are permanently barred from public office, you forfeit all your pension and Social Security benefits, and you will be required to cooperate fully with ongoing investigations into corruption within the Georgia police force. Doyle's face turned white. 23 years. He would be 75 when he was released if he lived that long. As he was led away, he felt Mariah Devon squeeze his hand. "It's really over," she whispered. "The prison part is over," Mariah replied. "Next comes the civil suit, and the work to ensure this never happens again. That's just beginning." The lawsuit was settled 3 weeks later for $3.2 million. After reviewing the video evidence, the guilty verdicts, and the documents showing the course of events, Wilkinson County's insurance company decided that a trial would be more expensive. Mariah stood in Aisha's office, looking at the settlement agreement. It wasn't just about the money. $1.2 million would go to her, with the remainder distributed to other victims who joined the class action lawsuit. There were also systemic reforms. The Wilkinson County Sheriff's Department would be placed under federal oversight for 5 years. All officers would undergo mandatory bias training. Body cameras would be mandated, and footage would be retained. An independent civilian review board would investigate complaints. Quota systems for arrests would be permanently banned. And the county would fund a victim assistance program for those wrongfully arrested or targeted. "It's not perfect," Aisha said. "No settlement is perfect. But this is real change. Measurable, actionable change." "What about other counties?" asked Mariah. The FBI said the corruption wasn't limited to Wilkinson. 3 more sheriffs have been indicted. 5 departments are under federal investigation. Your case opened the door for many others to come forward. Aisha smiled slightly. "You didn't just get justice for yourself. You paved the way for others too." Mariah signed the settlement agreement, her signature firm and clear. Then she looked at Aisha. "I want to use the settlement money to start a foundation. Legal aid for people facing police misconduct who can't afford a lawyer. Support services for families dealing with the trauma of wrongful arrest. Training programs for law enforcement on how to serve the community instead of terrorizing it." "That's a lot of work," Aisha cautioned. "Running a nonprofit is basically a full-time job." "Then it's a good thing I'm unemployed," Mariah replied with a slight smile. Since her discharge, she had been living off her disability pension from the Marines and odd jobs. A foundation would give her a new purpose. "I'll get help too. The Hells Angels want to join. Devon is interested in using his engineering skills to develop tamper-proof body camera technology. Tasha wants to create medical support networks for people injured in clashes with the police." Aisha took out a notebook. "Okay then, let's start planning. What do you want to call it?" Mariah thought of her brother, whose phone had been destroyed for trying to document the truth. She thought of the courage he showed in bearing witness despite his fear. She thought of how his generation demanded accountability and transparency in ways previous generations had not. "The Devon Project," she said. "Because he showed me that even if they try to silence us, we can still bear witness." 6 months after Tanner's punishment, Mariah stood on a podium outside the Georgia state capitol. Behind her hung a banner reading, "The Devon Project. Justice should not stand alone." Beside her stood Devon in a suit, Tasha in her Hells Angels jacket, Bones representing the national organization, and legal counsel Aisha. The press conference was to announce the foundation's official establishment, but it was about more than paperwork and nonprofit status. It was a declaration that what happened to Mariah would not be ignored or forgotten. "When Officer Tanner arrested me 6 months ago," Mariah began, her voice carrying over the crowd of media, supporters, and curious onlookers, "he thought he was putting a troublemaker in her place. What he actually did was expose a system of corruption that had been operating in the shadows for years." She gestured to the people behind her. "The Devon Project isn't about revenge, it's about prevention. It's about ensuring that when someone faces abuse of authority, they don't have to face it alone. We provide legal aid, advisory services, advocacy, and support networks. We collaborate with law enforcement agencies that genuinely want to reform. And we create accountability mechanisms so that malicious individuals can no longer hide behind their badges." A reporter asked, "What is your message to other victims of police misconduct?" "Document everything. Record it if it's safe. Seek legal assistance immediately. And know that you are not alone. The Devon Project is here to amplify your voice and fight for justice." Mariah's face softened. "And good cops, I know you're out there. Please help us. Help us identify bad actors. Help us reform systems that protect abuse. Help us build something better. Another reporter, what is the role of the Hells Angels in all this? Bones stepped up to the microphone. The Hells Angels have always stood against injustice, but we've rarely had a platform to make that known to the public. The Devon Project provides us with that platform. We provide financial support, volunteer networks, and community organizing. We show that bikers are not the threat. Corrupt authorities are the threat. After the official announcement, as reporters gathered their equipment and the crowd began to disperse, a familiar figure approached. Deputy Sheriff James Cole, dressed in civilian clothes, looking uncertain but determined. "Miss Kane, can I talk to you?" Mariah studied him for a moment, then nodded. They moved away from the crowd. "I wanted to tell you that I'm working with reform groups," Cole said quietly. "I'm teaching new police officers how to recognize a corrupt culture and how to resist it. I share my story about what can happen when you stay silent." "That's good," Mariah said neutrally. "I know I can't take back what I was part of, but I'm trying to make sure no other rookie makes the mistakes I did." She paused for a moment. "For the Devon Project, do you need people who understand law enforcement from the inside? People who can help bridge the gap between communities and good cops?" Mariah considered this. She had testified against Cole, Tanner, and Doyle, exposed systematic abuse, and sacrificed her career to do the right thing. She was trying to make amends. "Send me your resume and references from the reform groups you've worked with," he finally said. "We'll consider it. But understand this. You'll be working with people you've victimized, either directly or by remaining silent. That will be uncomfortable. I understand, and I will do whatever it takes to regain even a fraction of the trust I betrayed." The real celebration took place that evening at a motorcycle club outside Atlanta. 50 Hells Angels members, Devon, Tasha, Luis Martinez from Georgia, and a few others from the class action lawsuit had gathered. Bones stood at the front of the room, pride on his weathered face. "Brothers, we are here today to honor one of our own. Mariah Kane didn't just overcome an injustice, she turned it into a movement. She turned her pain into a purpose. Thanks to her courage, real change is happening." He pulled out a leather-wrapped package. "The National Council met last month. They asked me to give you this." Mariah opened the package, revealing a new Hells Angels jacket. But beneath the traditional patches was something new, a badge elegantly inscribed with National Justice Advocate. "This is a first in the organization's history," Bones explained. "You'll work with chapters nationwide on police accountability, civil rights advocacy, and community relations. Your story, the foundation, your desire to fight, it's changing how people see us. Not just as bikers, but as a force for justice." Mariah ran her fingers over the new patch, feeling the weight of the responsibility and honor it represented. "I accept, and I promise to use this position to help anyone in need, whether they wear our colors or not." The room echoed with applause and the sound of engines, the traditional Hells Angels salute. Devon approached with a small box. "I wanted to give you something too. I've been working on it with my engineer friends at school." Inside was a small device that looked like a modified phone case. "This is a body camera system that transfers directly to cloud storage. Since the images are recorded remotely before anyone can dismantle the device, it's indestructible like my phone. The patent has been filed. The first production series will be donated to the Devon Project." Mariah hugged her brother tightly. "You're an amazing kid. This will save lives. That's the point. Technology in the service of justice." My father loved this engineering challenge. For a moment, the memory of the couple who raised children who died young but fought for what was right hung in the air. Tasha appeared with 2 bottles of water. "To hydration and clear minds," she said with a smile, "because we have a lot of work to do tomorrow." "Tomorrow and every day after that," Mariah agreed. "The Devon Project is just beginning. There are still corrupt departments, there are still victims who need help, there are still systems that need reform. But we're not doing this alone anymore," Tasha pointed out. "We have resources, allies, a national network, and proof that fighting back works." 3 months later, Mariah was parked beside her Harley on a highway outside Atlanta, waiting for the Justice Ride to begin. It had become a monthly event. Hells Angels members from across the Southeast gathered, touring communities, civil rights, police accountability, and the Devon Project to TED. Today's tour would pass through Wilkinson County, not to intimidate or threaten, but to show the community that change is possible and that people who have been victimized can succeed despite what has been done to them. Devon arrived on Tasha's motorcycle. She had gotten her motorcycle license 2 months ago and planned to buy her own Harley after graduation. Tasha, wearing the same Hells Angels jacket as Mariah's Hells Angels jacket, and was riding alongside her on her motorcycle. "Are you ready?" Tasha asked. Mariah looked at the gathered riders. There were over 200 motorcycles representing 30 different chapters. Veterans, nurses, teachers, mechanics, small business owners. They were all united by their love of riding and their commitment to justice. "I'm ready," she said. Bones gave the signal, and the engines roared to life. The convoy moved in perfect order, a living testament to solidarity and strength. They passed through small towns and drove past the gas station where it all began. Louise stood at the door waving. There was no Confederate flag sticker. Instead, "Everyone welcome here." They passed the courthouse where Mariah had been wrongfully held and where justice had finally been served. New officers were now patrolling, part of a reformed department operating under federal oversight. They passed the prison where Tanner and Doyle had served their sentences. They had learned the hard way that badges did not grant immunity, and that the consequences of abusing power. When they reached the open highway, the sun gilding everything, Devon pulled up alongside his sister's motorcycle. His voice cut through the roar of the engine, sometimes filled with simple wisdom that took years to grasp. "You showed them who you are, Mariah, who we all are." Mariah looked at her brother and saw not the frightened 12-year-old who had lost his parents, but the strong young man who was helping to change a broken system. She saw Tasha who was her sister in every way except blood. She saw Bones and the drivers who stood by her in everything. She thought of the Devon Project, which was now helping families in 6 states. She thought of the body camera technology Devon had developed, which saved evidence before it could be destroyed. She thought about the reforms spreading through the Georgia police force. She thought about the victims who no longer had to suffer in silence. "No," Mariah replied, her voice echoing in the wind. "We showed them who we are, together." They rode toward sunset, the highway stretching endlessly before them. They were no longer just bikers. They were symbols of something bigger. They proved that justice was possible when you refused to stay silent, when you documented the truth, when you stood together. Behind them, the Devon Project banner fluttered from one of the support vehicles. Justice should not stand alone. It was a promise. It was a mission statement. It was a declaration that what happened to Mariah Kane would not be forgotten or ignored. It was a declaration that every victim to come would have resources, support, and a community ready to fight alongside them. The engines roared on, carrying this message across highways and side roads, small towns and big cities, to everyone who needed to hear it. You are not alone. Justice is possible, and those who abuse power will be held accountable. Mariah Kane had been arrested because she was black and wore the colors of a motorcycle club. She had survived. She had resisted. She had won. And now she was ensuring that this victory held meaning for everyone who came after her. The road stretched ahead, filled with hope and purpose, and the Hells Angels rode together on this path, carrying justice on 2 wheels and proving that sometimes the most powerful force for change comes from the places society least expects. They rode for Mariah. They rode for Devon. They rode for every victim whose pain was said to be insignificant. And they rode for the future. A future where patches signify service, not oppression. A future where leather jackets and dark skin didn't automatically make you a target. A future where justice wasn't just a promise, but a reality. The sunset painted them in shades of orange and gold as they disappeared down the highway, their engines roaring their defiance and victory. Justice was no longer alone, the South's angels, and this was only the beginning.